The morning began like any other bright, upbeat broadcast, with studio lights glowing and the familiar energy of the Today Show filling the room. Jack Black walked out smiling, waving to the crowd, carrying his usual playful charm that audiences expect. Savannah Guthrie greeted him warmly, and for a moment everything felt easy, even joyful. Jack joked about early call times and too much coffee, and the audience laughed right on cue. Nothing in those opening seconds suggested that the conversation ahead would take such an uncomfortable turn. Savannah started with light questions about Jack's latest project, his love for music, and how he balances comedy with sincerity. Jack leaned into it, animated as always, telling stories with his hands and expressive face. The banter felt natural, the kind of exchange morning shows thrive on. But slowly, the tone shifted. Savannah introduced the topic framed as something viewers keep asking about, and Jack's smile softened, becoming more measured, as if he sensed the ground changing beneath the conversation. The question wasn't aggressive, but it carried an edge, referencing criticism Jack had faced online and moments where his humor was labeled out of touch. Jack responded thoughtfully, saying comedy evolves and everyone learns with time. He kept his voice calm, even gentle, trying to meet the question with reflection rather than defense. Savannah nodded, but followed up with another question that felt less curious and more pointed, pressing him to respond to specific accusations circulating on social media. The studio air grew heavier. Jack shifted in his chair, still polite, still composed, but less playful. He explained that internet criticism often removes context, turning jokes into weapons. Savannah countered by saying some viewers felt genuinely hurt, and asked if he believed comedians should be held publicly accountable in moments like that. Jack paused before answering, choosing his words carefully, emphasizing empathy while also defending creative freedom. The audience stayed quiet, sensing tension. Jack's answers were longer now, more deliberate. He spoke about intent versus impact, about listening without self-erasure. Savannah acknowledged his point, then reframed the issue, suggesting that intent might not matter when harm is felt. That framing visibly unsettled Jack. He nodded slowly, but his expression tightened, the sparkle that usually defines him dimming as the conversation felt less like dialogue and more like judgment. Savannah pressed on, referencing a past interview clip that had resurfaced online. She described it in detail, asking Jack to respond directly to how it made people feel. Jack blinked, surprised, and asked which clip she meant. When she clarified, he sighed softly and said he hadn't seen it framed that way before. He tried to explain the context again, but Savannah interrupted gently, reminding him that viewers were watching right now. That interruption changed the energy. Jack laughed awkwardly, then stopped himself. He said he was happy to discuss growth, but felt uncomfortable being put on the spot with selectively framed moments. Savannah replied that live television often requires directness. Jack nodded, but his shoulders tensed, and the warmth between them cooled. The audience murmured, unsure how to react, caught between empathy and curiosity. Jack attempted to redirect, talking about how comedy can open conversations rather than close them. Savannah listened, then asked whether he regretted any of his past work. Jack said regret is complicated, and that he prefers learning over self-flagellation. Savannah followed up by asking if that was enough for people who felt embarrassed or mocked by his jokes. The word humiliated slipped into the conversation, and Jack's face changed instantly. He leaned forward, voice still calm but firmer now, saying he never set out to humiliate anyone. He stressed that intention matters deeply to him as an artist and as a person. Savannah replied that impact matters more to those on the receiving end. The exchange became a loop, each response circling the same point from opposite sides. The playful morning show rhythm was gone, replaced by something heavier and far more personal. Jack took a breath and said he felt the conversation was becoming unfairly framed. Savannah pushed back, saying the questions were fair and reflective of public discourse. Jack replied that public discourse is often cruel and reductive. The studio fell silent, the band not playing, the cameras holding tight shots on their faces. It was no longer entertainment, it was a confrontation unfolding in real time. Savannah tried to soften her tone, saying she respected Jack and wanted to give him space to explain. But then she asked another question that suggested he had avoided accountability in the past. Jack's eyebrows lifted in surprise, and he shook his head slowly. He said that assumption wasn't true, and that he felt mischaracterized. His voice didn't rise, but the disappointment in it was unmistakable. Jack explained that accountability doesn't always look like public confession, and that growth can happen privately. Savannah responded that public figures benefit from public platforms and should respond publicly. Jack countered that being visible doesn't mean surrendering dignity. The audience reacted with a soft wave of murmurs, sensing the collision of two deeply held beliefs. At this point, Jack's humor was completely gone. He sat back, hands clasped, eyes steady. He said he felt the conversation had crossed from discussion into accusation. Savannah looked surprised and said that wasn't her intention. Jack replied that intention doesn't always match impact, echoing her earlier words back to her. That moment landed sharply, drawing a quiet gasp from the crowd. Savannah attempted to regain balance, suggesting they move on to lighter topics. Jack hesitated, then said it was hard to switch gears when he felt put on trial. Savannah insisted no trial was happening. Jack answered gently but firmly that it felt humiliating to defend himself against narratives he didn't recognize. The word humiliating hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. The tension reached a breaking point. Jack said he respects journalism, but he came expecting a conversation, not a confrontation. Savannah replied that sometimes conversations are uncomfortable. Jack nodded, then said discomfort shouldn't come at the cost of respect. The audience stayed silent, fully aware they were witnessing something unscripted and raw. Jack glanced off stage briefly, then back at Savannah. He said he needed to set a boundary. Savannah asked what he meant. Jack replied that he didn't feel okay continuing the interview under those conditions. Savannah looked stunned, asking if he wanted to take a break. Jack shook his head slowly, apologizing to the audience with his eyes. As Jack stood up, the movement itself felt loud in the quiet studio. Savannah rose halfway from her chair, asking him to reconsider. Jack said he appreciated the invitation to the show, but he couldn't stay. His voice remained calm, but resolute. The cameras caught every second, turning a personal boundary into a public moment. The audience gasped as Jack stepped away from his seat. Some clapped softly, others sat frozen. Savannah tried to address him again, but Jack was already moving toward the exit path. He gave a small wave, not playful, but polite, a silent apology for the disruption. Savannah turned back to the camera, clearly shaken but professional. She told viewers they would take a short break. The band played an awkward transition, applause following out of habit rather than enthusiasm. Offstage, Jack disappeared from view, leaving behind a studio filled with unresolved tension. Within minutes, clips of the moment began circulating online. Headlines used dramatic language, debating whether Jack had been pushed too far or whether he overreacted. Social media split into camps, some praising him for protecting his dignity, others accusing him of avoiding accountability. The short clips traveled faster than any full context could. Commentators replayed the exchange frame by frame, analyzing tone, posture, and phrasing. Some claimed Savannah was doing her job. Others argued the interview crossed into shaming. Jack's usually joyful public image made the moment feel even more jarring, as if a trusted persona had been cracked open under pressure. Entertainment insiders speculated about what happened behind the scenes. Did Jack's team know those questions were coming? Were producers pushing for a viral moment? Without answers, rumors filled the gap. Each retelling sharpened the story, sanding away nuance until only conflict remained. Savannah later addressed the moment briefly, saying the show aims for honest conversations and never intends to make guests uncomfortable. Jack stayed silent publicly, which only fueled further debate. Silence became its own statement, interpreted differently by everyone watching from the outside. Fans revisited past Jack Black interviews, comparing his energy, searching for signs of change. Some said the incident showed growth and self-respect. Others said it showed fragility. The truth, as always, was likely more complicated than either extreme. What made the moment resonate was its relatability. Many viewers recognized the feeling of being misunderstood in a public setting, of trying to explain yourself while the room seems decided against you. Jack's walk-off wasn't just celebrity drama, it echoed everyday experiences of discomfort and boundary setting. In media culture, walk-offs are treated like verdicts. Leaving becomes louder than staying. Yet staying sometimes means absorbing humiliation silently. Jack's choice forced viewers to ask which is braver, enduring discomfort for the sake of optics, or stepping away to protect yourself. The incident also reignited conversations about interview ethics. How hard is too hard? Where is the line between accountability and ambush? Morning television walks a delicate balance between warmth and seriousness, and when that balance tips, the fall is very public. Days later, the clip still circulated, detached from the rest of the episode, existing as its own story. For many, that clip became the truth, even if it was only a fragment. That's the nature of viral moments, so they shrink reality to what fits the screen. Jack Black eventually returned to public appearances, smiling again, joking again, but some fans noticed a new caution. Savannah continued hosting, seasoned and steady, but the moment lingered in the show's history. Neither career ended, but both narratives subtly shifted. In the end, the full story wasn't just about an interview gone wrong. It was about expectations colliding, a host seeking direct answers, a guest seeking respect, and an audience eager for authenticity but quick to judge. Jack Black walking off the Today Show became less about blame and more about boundaries, reminding everyone that even under bright lights, human limits still exist. As the days passed, media analysts began reframing the incident as a cultural moment rather than a single clash. They talked about how interviews have changed in the age of clips, where every answer is mined for controversy and every pause can be turned into a headline. Jack Black's walk-off was no longer just about him, it became a symbol of how guests navigate visibility in an era that rewards discomfort more than understanding. Fans who had followed Jack's career for decades pointed out how unusual the moment felt. He's long been seen as approachable, self-aware, and willing to laugh at himself. That's why the tension felt shocking, all because it clashed with a persona built on joy and openness. For supporters, the walk-off didn't contradict that image, it reinforced it, suggesting that even the most lighthearted people have lines they won't allow others to cross. Critics, however, argued that humor doesn't exempt anyone from scrutiny. They claimed Jack's discomfort was the result of being challenged outside his comfort zone. In their view, walking off looked like avoidance. This divide highlighted a deeper disagreement about what audiences expect from celebrities: endless accessibility or selective privacy. The debate wasn't really about Jack anymore, it was about what society believes public figures owe the public. Television insiders quietly noted how rare true walk-offs actually are. Most guests endure uncomfortable questions, smile through tension, and debrief later in private. Choosing to leave mid-interview breaks an unspoken industry rule. That's why the moment carried such weight up. It disrupted a norm that usually prioritizes smooth optics over emotional honesty. Jack's exit broke that pattern, and breaking patterns always invites scrutiny. The production side of the show also came under discussion. Viewers speculated about producer cues, earpiece instructions, and whether Savannah was encouraged to push harder. Morning shows operate with layered decision-making, and a host is rarely acting alone. This realization complicated the narrative, reminding audiences that what looks like a personal confrontation often involves many invisible hands guiding the flow. Meanwhile, commentary channels and reaction videos multiplied. Some reenacted the interview dramatically, others slowed it down, adding captions that reframed tone and intent. Each reaction added another layer of interpretation, moving the story further away from the original exchange. By the time casual viewers encountered it, the moment had already been filtered through dozens of opinions. The language used around the incident also mattered. Words like humiliating, stormed, and explosive amplified emotions, even though Jack never raised his voice. Calm exits rarely fit viral narratives, so they're rebranded as dramatic confrontations. That exaggeration feeds engagement, but it also distorts reality, turning measured boundary setting into perceived meltdown. Some mental health advocates weighed in, pointing out how difficult it can be to manage emotional pressure in public. They argued that recognizing when to step away is a sign of self-awareness, not weakness. Others countered that resilience means staying and explaining. The conversation shifted from celebrity gossip to broader questions about emotional labor and public expectation. Savannah Guthrie's role continued to be debated as well. Longtime viewers defended her professionalism, noting that she's known for tough but fair interviews. They argued she was doing what journalists are meant to do: ask questions people want answered. That defense complicated attempts to cast her as a villain, showing how easily narratives flatten experienced professionals into one-dimensional roles. Over time, the intensity of the discourse began to cool. New controversies emerged, new clips went viral, and the internet's attention shifted. But for those who watched it live, the memory lingered. Live television has a different texture than viral clips. It carries the weight of witnessing something unfold without edits or captions telling you how to feel. Jack Black never publicly detailed his feelings about the incident, which left room for endless interpretation. Some fans respected the silence, seeing it as consistency with his desire for boundaries. Others wished for clarity, but clarity, once promised, often becomes another demand, and demands are exactly what the moment seemed to push back against. In retrospect, the interview exposed a fault line between curiosity and confrontation. A question can be valid and still feel invasive. An answer can be honest and still feel insufficient. When those tensions collide on live TV, there's no rewind button, only reactions, judgments, and speculation layered on top of one another. The walk-off also reminded viewers that celebrities are not just content generators, they are participants in conversations that affect their reputations, families, and sense of self. When a guest leaves, it forces everyone watching to confront an uncomfortable truth: entertainment has limits, even if algorithms pretend it doesn't. Years from now, the clip may resurface as a throwback moment, stripped of context and reshared for nostalgia or clicks. New audiences will form opinions without remembering the larger cultural conversation surrounding it. That's how these moments endure, not as full stories, but as fragments repeatedly reinterpreted. Ultimately, the extended story of Jack Black on The Today Show isn't about who won or lost the exchange. It's about a moment when performance collided with personal boundaries, and the collision was visible to millions. The lasting impact lies in that visibility, a reminder that even in polished studios, human limits still matter, and sometimes walking away says more than staying ever could. After the initial storm, entertainment writers began asking a quieter question: what does a good interview even mean now? In the past, a good interview might be one that was funny, revealing, or inspiring. Today, good often gets confused with shareable. A tense moment becomes valuable because it travels. That creates a pressure cooker where both host and guest are aware that the most memorable thing could be the most uncomfortable thing. Some viewers noticed how Savannah's phrasing kept returning to what people think and feel. Jack seemed to push back against that collective voice, as if he didn't want to be judged by a crowd he couldn't see. That's a common friction point. A host uses the public as justification, while the guest experiences it as a pile-on. The more the host says people are asking, the more the guest hears you're being accused. The audience at home became divided not just by opinion, but by personal history. People who have been publicly shamed saw Jack's discomfort as deeply familiar. People who have felt dismissed by public figures saw Savannah's persistence as necessary. The interview, in that sense, acted like a mirror. It didn't just show Jack and Savannah, it showed viewers their own relationship with confrontation, accountability, and embarrassment. A lot of the heat came from the word humiliating. Even if it was used in a broad sense, it carries a sting, because humiliation implies intention. Jack's entire brand is built on being a joyful entertainer, not a cruel one. So when humiliation entered the framing, it hit like an identity attack. That's why he stopped joking. Comedy can survive critique, but it struggles when the critique turns into moral judgment. From a production perspective, one of the most difficult things about a tense interview is the lack of reset. In a scripted segment, you can cut, reshoot, or reframe. Live or near live shows don't have that luxury. The host can try to lighten the mood, but the guest's nervous system doesn't instantly follow. Once someone feels cornered, every new question sounds sharper, even if it's neutral. That's how small misunderstandings grow into big exits. There were also theories that the segment had been structured to bait the moment, not because anyone is cartoonishly evil, but because television is competitive and attention is scarce. Producers might not plan a walk-off, but they may plan a push on more direct questions, tighter follow-ups, fewer soft landings. Sometimes that creates great interviews. Other times it creates the exact rupture you saw, a guest deciding the cost of staying is higher than the cost of leaving. On social media, fans started collecting receipts, pulling up clips of Jack being kind on sets, stories of him supporting charities, anecdotes from crew members. Critics did the opposite, pulling up edgy jokes and older bits to argue patterns. The internet turns people into folders. Evidence for, evidence against. But a person is not a folder. A person is contradictory. Yet virality hates contradiction. It demands a verdict. The phase "he can dish it but can't take it" appeared in comments, a common line used against comedians. But comedy isn't always about dishing up. It can be about vulnerability, absurdity, and shared silliness. Jack's style has often leaned toward the playful and theatrical. When confronted with accusations of harm, he seemed to want nuance. Savannah's approach seemed to want a direct acknowledgement. Both approaches can be reasonable, yet they collide when time is short and stakes feel high. The moment Jack stood up became the emotional climax, and everything before it was retroactively read as build-up. People started saying, "You could see it coming." That's the storyteller's trick. Once you know the ending, you interpret every earlier detail as a sign. A small pause becomes a warning. A forced laugh becomes a crack. But in real time, it's rarely that clear. In real time, everyone is just trying to make it through the moment without embarrassment. Afterward, viewers debated whether Jack owed Savannah an apology for leaving her on air to manage the fallout. Others argued Savannah owed him an apology for how the segment was framed. These debates reveal a deeper confusion. People treat public interactions like friendships with rules of politeness, but talk shows are not friendships. They're professional spaces shaped by production goals, audience expectations, and public narratives. When those forces collide, personal feelings get caught in the gears. The broader impact was a renewed caution among celebrities. Publicists become stricter. Topic lists become tighter. Interviews become safer. That's the paradox. When viewers demand real, the industry often responds by becoming more guarded. Fewer risks, fewer surprises, more rehearsed answers. The exacting audiences say they hate how manufactured prab becomes the default because viral culture punishes vulnerability when it doesn't fit a clean, flattering arc. If Jack ever speaks about the incident later, he might frame it as a boundary. If Savannah ever speaks more openly, she might frame it as journalism. Both framings can be true from their perspectives. The public often forgets that multiple truths can coexist. The real conflict isn't always about facts, it's about how people interpret tone, intention, and respect. That's why two viewers can watch the same clip and feel completely different things. The moment also highlighted how easily empathy gets lost in live confrontation. A host may feel empathy and still push. A guest may feel empathy and still leave. Empathy isn't always visible. Cameras capture words, not inner motives. That's why viewers project motives. She wanted to shame him. He wanted to dodge. Projection fills the gaps left by limited context, and those gaps are wide on television. Over time, the incident became less about Jack Black as a person and more about the system that creates viral conflict. Viewers started asking for longer, calmer interviews, more context, less gotcha energy. But the demand for drama remains strong, because drama is easy to market, so the cycle continues. Audiences condemn conflict while clicking on it. Outrage becomes entertainment, and entertainment becomes outrage. In the end, Jack's exit left a lingering question that didn't have a neat answer. When does questioning become shaming, and when does discomfort become disrespect? The broadcast moved on, but viewers didn't. They kept debating because the moment touched something deeper than celebrity gossip: the universal fear of being misunderstood in public, and the universal desire to leave a situation that feels humiliating. That's why the clip stayed alive long after the studio lights dimmed.